Today we're going to talk about whether No Limit Hold'em or PLO is best for you. I started my career in No Limit Hold'em, moved to the highest stakes that ran before switching over to PLO, and that's really been my home ever since for over a decade now. There are certain things about each game which attract people to them, but there are actually certain qualities that players have that lend themselves better to one game or the other. Though it might be counterintuitive, if you have trouble facing a lot of aggression, PLO might be the best option for you. People think of PLO as a very loose and aggressive game, and that's kind of true. But there are some differences between it and No Limit Hold'em that actually make it easier to face that aggression. In No Limit Hold'em, when you're facing big bets and raises, you almost always are left with a bluff catcher with very little equity to improve against the range your opponent's representing. And if you're uncomfortable facing players who are just blasting away flop, turn, and river, and in order to make a stand, you need to call them down with a bluff catcher, PLO might be a good option for you. Even when you don't have the nuts, you very often flop and turn hands with so much equity that they don't have to fold anyways. Your opponent's repping a set on the flop. Okay, I have an open ender and a flush draw. I don't have to fold yet. Your opponent's betting the turn again. Okay, well now I have top pair with my open ender and flush draw and I can see a river. And then oftentimes on the river, you make your straight or you make your flush and you no longer need to get run over. Despite the fact that pots get bigger, it's actually much easier to make hands that can handle that heat in PLO. What if you're a good hand reader? Which game is right for you? Well, hand reading is important in all forms of poker, but in some it matters a little bit more than in others. I like to think of myself as a very good hand reader, and I'm a PLO player, but actually I believe that hand readers do best in No Limit Hold'em. The problem with hand reading in PLO is that the nuts change so often from flop to turn to river. So if you get some kind of read, whether it's based on your opponent's bet size or your history with them or a physical tell on the flop that they are weak, by the time the turn and river hit, that flop read won't be that important anymore. Whereas in No Limit Hold'em, if they're weak on the flop, they're probably still weak on the turn and probably still weak on the river. So if you get a strong read at any point in the hand, you're more likely to be able to take that to the bank. Hand readers, good news is you're welcome everywhere, but I would suggest No Limit Hold'em. So you're good at math. Which game suits you best? Well, this is good news again, because being good at math is great for all forms of poker. There are actually different kinds of math that are more important in each game. So in No Limit Hold'em, you can count actual combos of hands. So you can know that your opponent has 16 combos of ace king, and they have 6 combos of queens, or whatever the case may be. In PLO, it's a lot more difficult. Being able to quickly on the spot get a good feel for, okay, well, the bluffs make sense. Maybe he's got those kind of hands 20% of the time, and maybe he's got these value hands like 30% of the time. Maybe he's got a draw the rest of the time. Something in that range. If you're able to do that very quickly, even if you're not exactly right, that's the kind of math that really helps you excel at PLO. If you are a creative player who finds opportunities to make really big plays, whether they're big bluffs or big call downs, which game is right for you? This is something that I really view as a strength of mine, but I actually think it's better as a No Limit Hold'em player than as a PLO player. Similar to the topic about handling aggression, in PLO, if you make a really creative play because you think your opponent's weak, they still have a lot of hands that they can call you with on the flop, and they still have a lot of hands that they can call you with on the turn, and then the river changes the board, and your creative line that started on the flop to represent a hand no longer really makes sense anymore. Whereas in No Limit Hold'em, the story that you're trying to tell across multiple streets is more likely to hold up because the board is not going to change as much. So creative players, unleash your creativity at the No Limit Hold'em tables. You could sprinkle a little bit in at the PLO tables as well, but Hold'em is where you'll really shine. If you're a player who struggles to bluff, well, you should work on that. But in lieu of that, which game should you play? I actually think you're going to do a little bit better at Pot Limit Omaha. At No Limit Hold'em, it's kind of easy to tell when a player is not bluffing enough, and that very tight player stops getting action pretty quickly. In PLO, there are so many combinations of hands that have a little piece of this and a little piece of that, that even if your image is really tight, you're gonna get called on the flop, you're gonna get called on the turn, and maybe they just find a reason to call you on the river. If I'm playing No Limit Hold'em against a really uncreative type player, I'm just making big folds right away on the flop really frequently because my hand is not going to improve much, and I know that I'm usually beat. If you're a really studious person who likes more certainty, No Limit Hold'em can offer you that. The technology right now with solvers is so much more advanced for No Limit Hold'em. The game is much more simple because of the fewer number of combinations of each hand. So if you're somebody who really likes answers, Hold'em is the place to go. PLO is not quite as neat and tidy. There are solutions available. It's a solved game, just in the same way No Limit Hold'em is, but the tools are not nearly as far along. The reason for that is because there are so many more combinations of hands. It's not just like going from 2 cards to 4 cards doubles the combinations, it's exponentially more combinations of hands. And so the computers are having a harder time handling it, and our human brains have even that much more trouble. Even when you're looking at solutions, it's impossible to memorize and emulate a solver strategy in PLO. So you do have to do a lot more guesswork at the table. If you like concrete answers, you're gonna find them in No Limit Hold'em. You're not gonna find them in Pot Limit Omaha as often. So what if you're an impatient person? You struggle with patience at the poker table. You just wanna play too many hands. Unfortunately, both games are gonna be pretty rough for you. Initially, I thought that PLO might be a better option because you can VPIP a little bit more often, but the thing is, when you're playing a 9-handed or 8-handed PLO game, you just get so punished for playing loose. In any form of No Limit Hold'em, unless you're playing heads up No Limit Hold'em, playing loose is gonna be rough on you. If you're impatient, work on your patience. If you struggle with bankroll management or tilt or anything associated with increased variance, PLO has a lot of increased variance. No Limit Hold'em is gonna be a better game for you. You're gonna have smaller swings, and the ill effects of those swings on you will happen less frequently and less aggressively. If you're looking to have a good time and punt, PLO is your answer. You always have equity. So what did I miss? What kind of player are you? Let me know in the comments what some of your strongest qualities or leaks are that I may have neglected to mention in this video, and I will give you my advice either in the comments section or in a future video like this. Hope you enjoyed. I will see you next time.